Let's get into it. A German court has convicted 97-year-old Irmgard Furchner of having contributed to the murder of thousands of people during her time as a typist working with a Nazi concentration camp during the Second World War. A district court in the northern town of Itzehoe handed her a 2-year suspended sentence under juvenile law, owing to the fact that she was only 18 years at the time of the crimes. Irmgard had worked at the Stuttgart concentration camp between 1943 and 1945. The start of a trial had been delayed in September last year when she briefly went on the run. She was caught hours after failing to turn up to court. Some 65,000 people died of starvation and disease, or the gas chamber at the Stuttgart near Gdansk in today's Poland. They included prisoners of war and Jews caught up in the Nazi extermination campaign. The prosecutor in Irmgard's case said all documents which still existed from the concentration camp were analyzed in this trial. They also searched for her signature and her initials, which was an incredible amount of work. A spokesperson for the district court said that after hearing the evidence, the court decided that Irmgard, through her work as a shorthand typist at the Stuttgart concentration camp, knowingly and willingly supported the cruel death of more than 10,500 prisoners through ratification, through inhumane conditions at the camp, through the transfer of the Auschwitz-Birkenau concentration camp, and through death marches. Irmgard, in a closing statement at the start of a trial this month, said she was sorry for what had happened and regretted that she had been in Stuttgart at the time. Let's bring in former ICC prosecutor Charles Adiogun Phillips, who joins me from Victoria Island, Lagos. Charles, great to see you, and thanks for making time to be with us today in compliments of the season. Of course, it's been a while we've had you on the show. You've seen scores of these sorts of cases. Someone who played a key role in a war being brought to book, facing trial. How significant is this for the German court to have handled Irmgard's trial instead of there being a special tribunal in this case?
Well, I think it's any conviction for an international crime is significant. In this case, it is even more significant because she was tried in a national jurisdiction. The move and the trend these days is to empower national jurisdictions to be able to prosecute international crimes. This, therefore, is a step, in my view, in the right direction, yes. So it is very welcome.
I don't suppose that any of the victims' families are alive today to witness, how this has happened in Germany today. But for those who lived through that time of the Second World War, and whose relatives were also tortured by the Nazi, does this bring some relief or comfort?
A conviction for an international crime certainly aids reconciliation. Justice and accountability are necessary ingredients, in my view, to foster reconciliation for victims of very large-scale human rights abuses. And again, this is yet another example of such victory.
So she was a minor. Well, she was just 18 years old, when she was employed to work with the Nazis. Do you think she did it on purpose? I mean, the court says she was just a juvenile, when this happened, which is why, they shortened his sentence. But do you think that she probably was well aware of what she was doing at the time?
Well, I think beyond the fact that she was well aware, I think the threshold is whether or not she had effective control to have prevented what happened. You've just described her as a copy typist. I very much doubt that even if, in spite of her awareness, she had any control to prevent or indeed to punish the perpetrators of this crime, and that is reflected in the diminished in her diminished role, and that's reflected in the sentence that she got. I'm sure the judges would have taken the view that, well, what could she have done to prevent these attacks, even if she was aware of them.
And Irmgard was on the run last year. At the start of her trial earlier this month, she said she was sorry about what had happened. She was also sorry that she was in Stuttgart at the time. Do you believe her?
I do. The expression of remorse has time and again been proven to be necessary to the indication of some measure of contrition. And I think that she has, it was good on her part and on the part of her legal advisors to ensure that she expressed some level of remorse to the various victims, dead or alive, of this heinous crime. Genocide is clearly one of the worst crimes ever known to mankind, and her ability to express some remorse goes a long way towards healing and reconciliation amongst the victims of those crimes.
That took her sentence. The judge says they handed her a 2-year suspended sentence because she was considered a minor at the time of the atrocities. But it could have been, could it have more to do with, her age? She's 97 years old now. What punishment would be fair for someone that age for crimes like these, especially as regards the atrocities committed during the Second World War?
One of the considerations of international criminal justice in terms of sentencing and accountability is to consider the age of the victim, both at the time the offenses were committed and at the time of sentencing. So as you've rightly pointed out, a 97-year-old, there will be no useful purpose served in her in committing her to prison for an extended period of time. I think that the mere fact that she's been made accountable for these crimes is enough indication to her, and humiliation, if I might add, to her and her family. Sentencing her to a lengthy sentence is not necessarily going to achieve anything in that sense. Then again, we must bear in mind that she was indeed a minor at the time, and that also serves as a mitigating factor in terms of considerations for international judges while sentencing, yes.
Yeah, but how is a suspended sentence punishment for the crimes that were committed, over 10,000 murders, as she signed off on?
It isn't. It isn't sufficient. It's more symbolic than anything, considering that she's almost 100 years old. It sends the wrong signals. Yes, it might do. But then again, like I said, what useful purpose will be served in having a lady who is almost 100 years old serving a prison term? Very, very little, I dare say.
Well, I guess we'll have to leave it at that. I mean, if the court decided that was a punishment for her, we'll have to respect that. Thank you so much, Charles, for speaking with us. And once again, a Merry Christmas to you.
I wish you the same. Thank you, Amarachi.
The Thai Navy has confirmed bodies of 5 Marines were recovered by rescuers today from the waters of the Gulf of Thailand after the HTMS Sukhothai sunk Sunday. 1 person was rescued alive. Dozens were forced to abandon the ship after it was hit by 4-meter waves and strong winds. There were 24 Marines still unaccounted for by this evening, local time, according to the Navy. Some were without life vests. A vessel had suffered an engine malfunction as it took on water and went down about 20 nautical miles of Prachuap Khiri Khan province. A U.S.-made corvette in use since 1987 was carrying 105 military personnel. There were 75 rescued seamen before the boat sank, but dozens had to abandon the ship in rafts and life jackets. Pakistan's Defense Minister Khawaja Mohammad Asif says security forces have retaken a police station that was captured, killing all 33 hostage takers. Islamist militants from the Pakistani Taliban seized the center in the remote northwestern Bannu district on Sunday. Several people, including security officials, were inside at the time. Asif said all hostages were freed, 2 special forces killed, and 10 to 15 members of the military were injured in this standoff. The Pakistani Taliban have stepped up their attacks since they ended a ceasefire last month. And Peruvian authorities have airlifted vulnerable stranded tourists from the Inca mountaintop citadel of Machu Picchu to the city of Cusco. Thousands of visitors and Peruvians were stuck for days in various locations as protesters blocked roads and forced airports to close. A wave of protest has been sweeping through Peru following the impeachment of President Pedro Castillo. Congress will vote later today on whether to bring elections forward. A month-long state of emergency remains in place, but Peruvian authorities appear to have made some headway reestablishing disrupted transport links. Officials in the South American country organized helicopters to evacuate tourists considered vulnerable from the ancient Inca citadel, located at a height of 2,400 meters in the Andes. We're in the United States now as Elon Musk, Twitter CEO, says Twitter will only allow accounts with a blue tick to vote on changes to policy after a majority of users voted for him to quit. Musk launched a Twitter poll asking if he should step down as chief executive. 57.5% of the users voted yes. Since then, he's not commented directly on the result of the poll. He, however, said Twitter will alter its rules so that only people who pay for a subscription can vote on company policy. One user claimed that the so-called bots appeared to have voted heavily in the poll about Mr. Musk's role at the firm. Musk said he found the claim interesting. A billionaire has said when he ran the poll that he would abide by the results. If he does quit as chief executive, he will remain, however, as Twitter's owner. In response to the tweet saying Twitter Blue subscribers should be the only ones that can vote in policy-related polls, we actually have skin in the game, according to Musk. Good points is said. Twitter will make that change. Meanwhile, homes and businesses were without power in the northern part of California today after a 6.4 magnitude earthquake hit off the coast. Social media videos showed damage inside one property in Ferndale, with domestic items damaged and strewn across the ground. The earthquake was about 10 miles deep, according to the U.S. Geological Survey. It struck about 7.4 west-southwest of Ferndale, about a 4-hour drive north of San Francisco. Let's check in on the lawmakers. The House of Representatives Committee investigating a January 6, 2021 attack on the U.S. Capitol on Monday asked federal prosecutors to charge former President Donald Trump with obstruction and insurrection for his role in sparking the deadly riot. The Democrat-led Select Committee's request to the Justice Department is non-binding, but it comes as a special counsel is overseeing 2 other federal probes of the Republican former president related to his attempt to overturn his 2020 election defeat and the removal of classified files from the White House. The panel asked the Justice Department to charge former President Trump with obstruction of an official proceeding of Congress, conspiracy to defraud the United States, making false statements, and aiding or inciting insurrection. A Justice Department spokesperson declined to comment on the committee's move. According to a strong Trump spokesperson, did not immediately respond to requests for comment. But Monday's meeting was the last final public gathering of a 9-member panel that spent 18 months probing the unprecedented attempt to prevent the peaceful transfer of power by thousands of Trump backers inspired by his false claims that his 2020 election loss to Democratic President Joe Biden was a result of widespread fraud.
That the laws be faithfully executed. Nothing could be a greater betrayal of this duty than to assist in insurrection against the constitutional order. The complete factual basis for this referral is set forth in detail throughout our report. We believe that the evidence described by my colleagues today and assembled throughout our hearings warrants a criminal referral of former President Donald J. Trump, John Eastman, and others for violations of this statute. The whole purpose and obvious effect of Trump's scheme were to obstruct, influence, and impede this official proceeding, the central moment for the lawful transfer of power in the United States.
Our Washington correspondent Maria Bird joins us now. Maria, we did spend some time, didn't we, earlier this year, just looking at, the January 6th committee meets every day, poring over details, asking lots of questions, inviting witnesses. And in the end, what did we learn from the first part of this January 6th committee that possibly might lead us into being more interested in the second part, or should I say the third part, which resumed yesterday?
Well, you bring a very good point. This has been a long-standing investigation on the part of the House of Representatives. When you think about the time, as you stated, that's been spent on this investigation, the amount of people that have been interviewed in this investigation. But I think as you talk about what have we learned, I think the most important issue I think that was brought forth is that there were people within the Trump administration that were uncomfortable with the way in which he was managing the country. And I think that that was not apparent during his administration. I think it came out through the investigation. And I think that this is just a unfortunate culminating matter that obviously things that have been occurring throughout his administration that were not what one might consider upholding the law and being a good manager and a one of principle and values to run and to manage the United States of America. And I think that when you listen to many of the testimonies by those who worked in his administration, you could clearly see the fear that they had. You could clearly see the uncomfortability that they had with many of the actions that were taken forth. And you can also see how it was drastically different than administrations prior to the Trump administration.
I have many questions, honestly, because it's pretty clear. I mean, we heard what Trump said on the day of January 6th. We heard how he instigated the crowd, how he inspired them to head towards the Capitol building, how he refused to call out the Proud Boys, what he did afterwards, how he took no responsibility for what happened back then. It appears the wheel of justice does grind really, really slow in the United States. And what is the January 6th committee expected to uncover, at the end of this last panel sitting, and what happens after?
So what they've uncovered, obviously, has been a myriad of areas of concern, which will bring them to the various charges that they are recommending to the Department of Justice. This is unprecedented in the United States. This is the first, to be very honest. I mean, we often have compared this to the Watergate scandals of President Nixon's administration, but it's still very different. We're talking about, this is not about files and about leaking of information or of improprieties from an administration perspective. This is an attack on our democracy. And so this is very, very different than what we've seen in years past. And to have a president being brought forth potentially with charges by our Department of Justice further states that I think that this is new ground for America. I think that the House of Representatives and specifically leaders of the Democratic Party and Liz Cheney within the Republican Party have been very conscientious and very clear that even though there is not any type of preceding investigations, previous cases that would speak to this, that this was a violation of what they believe the power of the president should have. And so they were very strategic and very focused on bringing forth and making sure the investigation was full. It was one that could provide us with clear understanding as to what occurred. And as you said, one that would expose if the president had agitated and created this type of attack on democracy, which I think if you talk about what is the outcome of this, the outcome of this is the fact that the president, based off of the House of Representatives investigation, the president was involved and does take some or should take some responsibility based off the list of charges for the attack on the Capitol.
Yeah, and I think not a lot of people agree, but the former president still has a lot of support. He's announced his 2024 presidency bid, and even though when he made the announcement that he was going to run again, there were reports afterwards that people were already bored with the speech and all of that, but he still does garner some support. At the end of the day, will the results of this probe, this committee, will it be heading to the DOJ, or will it be going back to the House or to the Senate to either ratify or vote on? What's the legal procedure here?
These recommendations will go to the Department of Justice, and they will see the legal ramifications around that and if they can charge him. Now, if they do move forward with charging him, he will be prosecuted by the Department of Justice, the federal government. And so that will then begin a trial in and of itself to be able to see if he is guilty of the charges. And if he is found guilty of the charges, then that potentially could put him out of the ability to be able to run for president. And as we all know, we've talked about before, that was part of the January 6th investigation. They wanted to ensure that whatever information, not only would it potentially deter voters from supporting him, but furthermore, that it would put him in the position where he would be unable to run for office in 2024. And I think that's the real key piece there, is that they want to ensure that if he has committed a crime and if he is convicted, that he is not eligible for the 2024 election season. But there's still other pieces to this. As you said, if it's I want to move to the Department of Justice, it'll probably be early January. We'll hear back on that early to mid-January. They will provide us with insights. But furthermore, it's up to the Republican Party as a whole if they want to take that type of risk. We expect to hear by February who the Republican National Convention will support for the 2024 elections. And so, we still have several different candidates that we are expecting to put their name in the hat for the Republican Party. So even without the Department of Justice charges, he still could be in jeopardy of not winning the nomination for 2024 as a result of all that's come out with this investigation.
So Liz Cheney, I think, lost her seat as a senator in the last election. Is she still sitting on this January 6th committee? And how will, her presence there impact, on the investigations?
Well, that was so critical about ensuring that the last day was Monday, was yesterday, because she will be no longer sitting in the seat, and she will no longer have the ability to speak on this matter in an official representative form. And so, having the investigation end from the House of Representatives on Monday was very important to the strategic nature of her voice and how important she has been to this investigation. And so now that it has now moved on to Department of Justice, I'm sure that the Department of Justice was expecting this, that before we even knew as a public that was going to happen, they were very much aware. So I think what's going to come out of this is her speaking out on how comfortable she is with the Department of Justice making sure that the recommendations are upheld and that there are charges brought against the former president.
Maria, thanks again. And we know that we'll be keeping a close eye on this. It will be historic, wouldn't it? That a former U.S. president could possibly be facing time in prison. But America's democracy, as thorough as possible, thanks to the House of Representatives as well as the Senate. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Not quite done with the United States yet. Former Hollywood film mogul Harvey Weinstein has been found guilty by a Los Angeles jury of raping a woman. A 2-month trial heard how Weinstein used his influence to lure women into private meetings before attacking them. A 70-year-old Oscar winner is facing up to 24 years in prison when he's sentenced. He's already serving 23 years in jail after he was convicted of rape and sexual assault at his first trial in New York 2 years ago. Weinstein was found guilty on Monday of rape and 2 sexual assault charges involving an accuser known as Jane Doe 1 to protect her anonymity. A jury could not reach verdicts on allegations by Jennifer Siebel Newsom, the wife of California Governor Gavin Newsom, and a woman known as Jane Doe 2. A mistrial was declared on those counts. He was also acquitted of sexual battery against an accuser known as Jane Doe 3.
Today, justice was won in the case of People versus Harvey Weinstein. In this criminal case, I represented Jane Doe 2. Number 2 is Lauren Young, who gives permission to use her name, and Natasha M., who was an 1101B witness, which is sometimes called a Me Too witness or a prior bad act witness. Lauren was also a witness in the New York criminal case against Harvey Weinstein. I just spoke to her, and she's very happy that there were convictions in this case. And she also indicates that if, as, and when the prosecution decides to prosecute Mr. Weinstein again, she is willing to testify again in a third criminal trial against Mr. Weinstein. In the New York criminal case, Mr. Weinstein was convicted of criminal sexual assault of my client, Mimi Haley. And based on that conviction, he was sentenced to 20 years in New York State Prison. He was also sentenced to 3 years after he was convicted of third-degree rape against another victim whom I did not represent in that case.
To Britain now, travellers were left waiting, or rather still in the United States. The travellers were left waiting at New York's JFK airport on Monday after British Airways flights were grounded for several hours due to a technical issue. British Airways apologized to customers today, saying our teams have now resolved a temporary issue that affected some of our long-haul flight planning systems overnight, which resulted in delays to our schedule. Some passengers took to social media to report they'd spent up to 3 hours waiting at John Kennedy International Airport. Technical issue did not affect flights. They had already departed and was not a safety issue, according to British Airways. But in Britain, though, nursing union chief Pat Cullen issued an ultimatum to Prime Minister Rishi Sunak as nurses walked out over pay and staffing shortages for the second time in a week, piling pressure on ministers to act. Joining striking nurses at the picket line at Gateshead in northern England, Cullen said she was available night and day for negotiations and that the Prime Minister had the ability to bring the strike to an end before the end of the week. The industrial action by up to 100,000 nurses is unprecedented in the British Nursing Union's 106-year history, but it says it has no choice as the soaring cost of living leaves workers struggling to make ends meet. The Royal College of Nursing Union, of which Cullen is the head, says its members' real-term earnings have fallen by 6% in the last decade. It's called for a pay rise of 5% above the RPI rate of inflation, which stood at 14% in November. Government has offered nurses around 4% on average on the recommendation of an independent pay review body and has declined to discuss pay further. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak says the nurses' demands are unaffordable.
I've said time and time again, I won't dig in if they won't dig in, but they need to find a room and bring me into it. I'm looking for that room every single hour of the day. I will not be found wanting in getting into that room, and I will be available night or day to do that. He can bring this strike to a conclusion before the end of this week. He owes that to this profession. He owes it to every member of the public in the country, so let's do it right now. And the Prime Minister needs to stop hiding behind the media. He needs to get into a room with me and discuss it. That's the respectful thing to do on behalf of the profession. I expect him to do that. I will be available night or day to do it, and he needs to do it before the end of this week. Otherwise, I fear we're going to end up going into a new year with escalation of industrial action that none of our nursing staff either deserve or want to do. We want to be in caring for our patients, we want to be looking after our patients, but we need to have pay addressed. We need to have the 50,000 vacancies in this country addressed, and this is on the Prime Minister's shoulders, not the nursing staff that are standing out here today, losing another day's pay to have their voice heard for their patients.
Well, the British government, however, has warned citizens not to undertake any risky activity when ambulance drivers and call handlers are due to strike over pay on Wednesday, leaving those with all but the most life-threatening conditions to make their own way to hospital. Speaking as tens of thousands of nurses, striking nurses that is, form picket lines outside hospitals, and a day before ambulance workers walk out, Junior Health Minister Will Quince warned there would be disruption for patients.
There will be disruption to service, and it is important that where people are planning any risky activity, I would strongly encourage them not to do so, because there will be disruption on the day. But the key thing is for anybody that does have an emergency situation or a life-threatening situation that they continue to call 999 as they would have done previously. Armed Forces personnel, who I'm hugely grateful for their support in this endeavour, around 750 members of Armed Forces personnel are supporting Truss. What they won't be able to do is break the law. They will not, so driving through red lights, they won't be able to turn blue lights on. They will be there to drive ambulances in a support capacity for individual Truss.
Welcome back. We're in South Africa now, where high school pupils from across the continent have been airing their views at the Johannesburg International Public Speaking Competition. The competition, known as the Johannesburg Summer Holiday Open, comprises group debates and individual speaking components. Among countries that took part in this year's tournament are Tanzania, Kenya, Botswana, Zimbabwe and South Africa. The grand final was held at the City Council chamber. Speaker of the Johannesburg City Council, Councillor Colleen Makubele, praised the efforts of participants get into the finals and encouraged African leaders to give space for the minds and voices of young people.
The debate topic was on the importance of prioritizing the establishment of smart cities, while the individual public speaking contestants tackled various topics. Tamara Dao from Tanzania spoke about how the COVID-19 pandemic led her to public speaking, something she never showed interest in.
Now, for the longest time, I was confused. But our school decided that instead of trying to force us not to play these sports, they would try to encourage us to get into other things, such as debate and public speaking. Personally, first thing that came into my mind was no thank you. The AOSDC came, and I wasn't planning on participating. But after a lot of encouragement, I decided that I should give it a try. So I did end up going to the AOSDC, and the second I gave my first public speaking and debating speech, I said, damn, I'm good.
The true meaning of the tree of life, wholeness, be as useful as a tree. So give life to others, give shelter to everyone, and grant fruits to all. Be good like a tree, says Mahatma Gandhi. The greatest task that every human is born with is the ability to see good, to do good, and to be good.
The Speaker of the Johannesburg City Council, Councillor Colleen Makubele, congratulated the participants, adding that Africa must look within for empowerment, as there is an abundance of potential leaders with solutions among the young.
I want to encourage you. Your mind is really the biggest resource that Africa has. And I want you to learn to cultivate that. And don't stop becoming that voice. This voice that you're bringing out now, don't be afraid to speak out on any matter, irrespective of which side of the argument you're on. The courage and the boldness to speak out, to use your voice to advance humanity.
At the end of a very long stretch of speaking, Arabile Mapiri, Johannesburg Student Council Mayor, was declared the winner of Public Speaking 2022, while Greenside High School Johannesburg beat St. Thomas High in the debate. There were other winners in various categories for the participants from various countries. We also got to speak to some participants, and they shared some of the highs and lows in the competition.
I'm extremely excited because it's been a tough ride, you always have to work hard to achieve your dreams. And nonetheless, me and my team have worked effortlessly hard with the help of our coaches and everything. Today is a dream come true. Today was just a reward for all of our sacrifices we made.
What I gained from this contest is how important me practicing how to speak, improving my skills, as well as how improving my techniques and how to speak and different aspects of debating and speaking. It showed me a different side of debating, how much actually you have to how much work you need to put in. Yeah.
I think one of the most important things I've learned is what the diversity, like what everyone can bring to the table, regardless of your gender or your race or what culture you're bringing to the table. And I've learned to be a bit more appreciative of what everyone has to offer and the uniqueness in every person that I have met so far.
There were a lot of lows, if I'm being honest, because I did both public speaking and debating. So for debating, we took a lot of losses. And then even for public speaking, there were some instances where I didn't really know what to do for that particular topic. So I really had to think long and hard. But I think in the ending, it was all worth it, considering where I'm at right now.
Today, I feel very, very proud to be an African. When I looked at these kids debating, making speeches, thinking through issues, analyzing, bringing critical arguments, it told me that Africa, really, we've got resources in the minds of our young people, very bright, very smart, and ready actually to lead.
The Summer Holiday Open is an international debating and public speaking tournament run by the Pan-African Schools Debating Council in partnership with the Johannesburg City Council. The official Speakers Cup was launched in 2020.
Now, I guess it's sweet dreams for the World Cup winner, Lionel Messi. A football star posted pictures of himself in bed with the famous golden trophy. And there he is. Argentina's squad arrived at Ezeiza International Airport on the outskirts of the capital, Buenos Aires, in the early hours of today. There was a huge crowd there welcoming them. A team were led from the plane by Captain Messi, who scored twice on the way to Argentina, beating France on penalties in Sunday's final in Qatar, labeled by many experts as the best ever World Cup final. Messi posted these pictures we're looking at of himself in bed with a trophy on his Instagram account. I guess that's how he's sleeping now. And we are in Christmas week, in case you haven't received the memo. Locals and tourists prepare to celebrate the event in the Dutch capital. Streets and famous canals of Amsterdam are currently decked out in festive lights. If you're there or intend to travel over there, dozens of people flocked to an ice skating rink in front of the city's central station, gliding past a giant Christmas tree while the ring glowed in changing colors. Tourists' boats sailed down the canals lined with Christmas lights and decorations. Cafes, tramways, and shop windows also sparkle with holiday trimmings. And in central Amsterdam, visitors can shop for presents at a Christmas market, as some could also enjoy sweets and warm up with mulled wine and beers. This year's displays come as many major European cities are cutting back on illuminations. Much of the continent faces an energy and cost of living crisis brought on by the Russian invasion of Ukraine. But it's Christmas, so there must be lights anyway. Yeah, I think my producers were very interested in that story. They wanted us to see the lights, see the food and everything. Have your lights up? And just remember, it's Christmas. Thanks for watching. I'm Amarachi Ubani.